The Baseball Together Network presents the Seattle Baseball Together podcast with your host, Blackjack Brad, and now Seattle Baseball Together.
Welcome to this month's episode of the Seattle Baseball Together podcast, Baseball Family. I am your host, Brad. As usual, I am here as your, typically what I've always said, your Seattle Mariners therapist, where we lay down on the couch and have a little bit of a therapy session, but less therapy. But I'm joined this month by a good friend of mine, Brian, who is a lifelong Mariners fan. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. You know, Brian, I was thinking tonight, it was crazy. It blows my mind to think that we've been friends for 15 years now. Can you believe that?
No, I cannot actually. That's well, now I feel really old and
I know.
Like that's crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. In fact, I had somebody the other day tell me that that her dad was a baseball coach in like the mid 90s for like 15-year-old age group, you know? And yeah. She's like, yeah, he took him to the World Series for age group and everything. I was like, oh my gosh. And so the league that I played in growing up when I was 13, 14, 15, Scott Brocious, who used to play with the Yankees, played in that league as well. And so I was like, oh, did he coach Scott Brocious? And she's like, no, it was these guys who everybody knew. I was like, oh yeah, because that's only a couple years before I was playing in the league. Oh my gosh.
Like, oh, bummer.
Oh, I'm so old.
Yeah, there are times in my life when I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm a young, hip, cool person. And then someone mentions something or I look at a date and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Yeah, the math, it just doesn't add up. Just feels like it shouldn't add up.
Nope. The pops in the knees and back. That also doesn't help.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But Brian, like I said, you've been a lifelong Mariners fan, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what was it that drew you to a life of, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit later, but we assume it's a life of misery. We're 20 years now without the playoffs. I mean, we saw this week that the Mariners matched actually the number of games played, actually exceeded today the number of games played in the Kingdom that have been played at Safeco and T-Mobile. So that's 1,755 games played in the Kingdom. And now, as of today, Saturday, August 28th, they have now played 1,756 regular season games at Safeco and T-Mobile. And they've actually had a winning record during that time, if you can believe it.
Of course, we would have a winning record during that time while also continuously not making the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, let's get back to you, Brian.
Yeah.
a little bit of a road there. What was it that brought you into this life of a Mariners fan?
But you were absolutely right in your first comment. This being a Mariners fan is, I know there's lots of, teams in various sports in the pros that have misery in their lives. And we are up there. It is it can be a sad time in life to be a Mariners fan. But I was born in Kirkland, Washington, home of Costco. Whoop, whoop.
There you go.
But that was it. My dad was a builder growing up, and so he, had the occasional hookup with seats. He knew the right people, I guess, and we actually we would get box seats. Granted, box seats
nice.
in the 90 what late 80s, early 90s.
Uh-huh.
A little different in price, than they are now.
I'm sure it's a little different experience overall too.
A little bit, yeah. It was, yeah. I've had some few times in the T-Mobile. I'm not used to calling it that. But yeah, sitting box seats in the Kingdom as a kid, just that was I don't know, I feel like for people who love baseball, like there are spiritual experiences. Uh-huh. And growing up, you played Little League, so I grew up playing baseball, but being able to see these guys and in the Kingdom, and that was kind of Seattle was a bit of a storied franchise in those years at least, and man, it was something like a little kid has never seen before, I guess. Seeing that for the first time is just a it's a powerful experience. And so it's never left. Even though we left Washington in 93
Okay.
to Montana. So, some of the best years I missed, but man, we were still watching them as much as we could. And my clothing choices now usually involve something that has a Mariners logo on it in some form or fashion, whether it's socks, wallets, hats, shirt. Like the love runs deep. And even though, it can be heartbreaking, just the nostalgia and those early years, it's been a sad but fun road to be a Mariners fan.
It has. Yeah, it really, that's the perfect way to describe it. What do you think you would consider your first memory as a Mariners fan? Like, was it at a game? Was it watching a game on TV? Was there something specific?
Honestly, it was like just being on, like it was box seats on the third base line. So it was kind of the opposing. So just being able to look and see the Mariners like sitting with their team, like from afar, and just the guys anyone up close, there was, not that there aren't a ton of stars now, but maybe I'm just a little bit more removed from the game, we don't have TV, don't have stuff like that. I'm, old and adult life, but just to see like those early 90s players that, we grew up getting their baseball cards, and to be able to be just staring around the Kingdome, and then I can look down and go, oh wow, like these guys are literally right in front of me. Like it's
crazy. I remember the first time I got up close and personal with a player, I was standing right next to Alex Rodriguez, and for me it was like, well, he is way bigger than he looks like he is on TV. Like he is, like it was crazy to have that experience and that realization. And then as an adult, one of the craziest experiences for me, talk about baseball cards, I didn't really like meet him actually, but I was in the same room as Paul Molitor in a post-game press conference in Minnesota. And that was like an unreal experience for me because I had like a bajillion Paul Molitor baseball cards growing up. And so
that's awesome.
So that experience, seeing somebody jump out from the card like that it was a crazy experience. But it's that experience of seeing everybody up close and personal the first time is awesome. It's an unforgettable experience for the first time. It's super cool.
Along with that, again, not to go too deep into it, but like that feeling, at least, and I'm sure, like you said, like you met this, and I'm going to say met this person because you were in the same room. So to me, that's like your buddies.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away. I've been, I try to go to as many games as I can, whether I'm Mariners games or other.
Right.
And I got to go back to Seattle, and Seattle was playing the Angels. And I was in my 30s. This was not too long ago. And we had, again, I'm humble brag. Sorry, people. One of my brother's best friends, they have access to some really good seats, box seats on the third baseline.
Nice.
And I had two experiences. The little kid in me, when Albert Pujols came out, and was just, doing some on deck work, and I thought, holy cow. And like you, he's massive.
Yeah.
And then Mike Trout, the new baseball fan in me, was like, oh my gosh, like I could throw gum at him right now.
Yeah.
And it's still a surreal experience to see, not, my love for the Mariners runs deepest, but the love of the game, seeing those guys, like you said, remotely in person or so close. It's just, 30 years later, I'm still like, oh man, this is cool.
Yeah. And there's times where I feel like such a dork, that like,
absolutely.
Like, especially when you realize like Mike Trout is like 5 years younger than me. And I'm a massive Bryce Harper fan, and he is like 7 or 8 years younger than me. And I'm just like, it's so weird to like be on that side of things, because as a kid, like growing up a huge Griffey fan, he was always like 15 to 20 years older than me, you know? So it's like, you could look up to him. You could really look up to him as, I mean, I idolized Griffey, but now it's like Bryce Harper is one of my favorite players because I like the way that he plays, but I can't be like, well, I'm like a huge fan because then I feel like a dork, you know?
Yeah, they're like, cool, bro, get a life. Like this young, like quit bugging the young people. Like it's weird. Like I'm sorry.
Yes. Move on, right?
Yeah.
Quit hanging out at the little league fields. I don't know.
Yeah. Like, hey, I used to play ball when I was your age too. Like
Yeah, that's
trying to
exactly what it feels like.
relive the glory days. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
wild though. Like,
Yeah, it's a different kind of I don't know what the word for it is, dichotomy. I don't know if that's the word, but
it is.
it's a strange thing. Right. It's a strange thing. But anyway, before we get too far into things and run out of time here, let's talk about the Mariners this month. So August, I'm looking at Oakland thinking August. August has been a fine month. I don't know if I would necessarily quantify it as like a great month. As of right now, the Mariners are 13-12 with 3 games to go. There's one more against the Orioles or the Royals in this terrible series that's happening right now, and then 2 more to start a series against the Astros on Monday and Tuesday. So far, I mean, dropped 3 in a row to the Royals, the stinking Royals, who, by the way, have won 7 out of their last 10. I don't know. Anyway, but the Mariners are now 5-5 in their last 10, and I'm having a hard time figuring this team out, Brian. I said last month that I still feel like they're average. I want to still say that I think that they're average, but at 69 and 61, sitting 8 games above 500, that feels a little bit better than average to me, but they continue to lose games they're not supposed to. So,
and I think that, man, I agree with you. Granted, maybe it's that like that little sad part of my brain that's angry with them all the time that also wants to call them an average team. But you're right. Like the last few years, I said a few years. The idea of us being above 500 and again, I think you're right. And they lose the games they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And they win the games they're not supposed to. So
I mean, won 2 games in Oakland before coming home and playing the Royals. You thought like, man, that's the momentum. At least take 2 out of the 4 against the Royals, right?
You would think, yes, but that's where Seattle likes to play with our hearts. Like, it's this is a shoe win,
mm-hmm.
and it's far from it. And those times when you're like, you're ready to just lose the game before you watch it and they win, it gets your heart so happy and excited. But then they just the letdown factor, because they're so streaky and it's in times you least expect.
Yes. And this is something that's kind of funny to me. So this week I was curious because I know there's been years in the past where if the Mariners had been in a different division, they would have made the playoffs within the last like 10 years. So I was curious after seeing that the Mariners actually have a winning record, 920 wins to 836 losses at Safeco T-Mobile. I was curious kind of like what those 20-ish years have looked like. So I started with the year 2000. That was the first full season at Safeco Field, right?
Yeah.
And the Mariners have had 10 winning seasons during that time. Now, given the history of the Mariners and the life that we live as Mariners fans, would you have ever thought that there would be 10 winning seasons in that run?
No, they all feel like losing seasons.
They all feel like losing seasons because they never make the playoffs. After having won 116 games, you would have thought that like there would be somewhere in there, and we were spoiled, right, with that great team that failed again, right?
And I think that's a big factor, though. All of us we've had various people or seasons or big moments that, and probably any team can say this, but
right.
They keep you hung, like ready to just on the edge of your seat. Like, oh, we're going to come back or we're going to do this. Like with that 116 win or, game winning season, that was, I think it was almost too much for our hearts to bear to see it that season end so poorly, so quickly.
Yeah.
And then the aftermath of it is, I think a lot of it that's stuck in our hearts. Like whether, again, like you said, 10 winning seasons, like that's
I,
not bad.
I was surprised
That's
that there
not,
was that many. Like, because I went through and looked at other teams like the Marlins, who have a World Series during that time, 6 winning seasons. The Orioles only have 5 during that time. The Rangers, who have been to the World Series once, twice, have 8 winning seasons is all. The Angels only have 12, not a whole lot more. The Astros only have 13. So, and 5 of those have come in the last 5 years.
yeah,
I
that's,
mean, really, I guess 4 of them have come in the last 4 years. I don't know. But anyway, so they haven't been like that far back. It's that they've been playing in such a good division that they've missed out on the playoffs, which is like so weird to think about that's been the problem, not necessarily the product on the field.
no. And because, and I think that again, maybe we're a little bit blinded when we look at that because of just missing so often that we don't, we don't necessarily see the forest for the trees. We miss that because we've done well in winning seasons, but
Yeah,
the no playoffs, the no playoffs in any sport
it's frustrating.
it's very frustrating. And then when you go back and when you tell me all these stats, it's more frustrating to know that we've actually done well as a franchise in the last 20 years. It's just felt not nearly that good.
Yeah, well, it's like, so just real quick, 2016, 86 and 76 finished the season 10 games over 500 and still missed the playoffs. And that came down to the last game of the season, second to last game of the season. Where's another one? 2018, 89 and 73, 16 games over 500, finished third in the division.
Ugh.
With 89 wins. Like, that's the frustrating thing, is like, I'm just like, gosh, just put them in the AL Central. We can make the playoffs every year.
Yeah. Yeah, just give the boys a chance to play in the postseason.
And that's the thing I've always said too, is like, I don't care if you win the division. I don't care if you get in as a wild card. Just get in, because anything can happen. We saw that with the Nats a couple years ago. And that's one thing this year is like, I don't feel like these Mariners are equipped to make a deep postseason run should they happen to sneak in with the wild card, right? I'm not expecting them to, I'll be honest. But next year, I feel like they're going to have the talent because Jared Kelenic, who's really been struggling. I mean, he's batting $150 right now, and that is after going over like 38 in a row. So he's been better, but he's still not what we've been expecting. But I'm expecting for a full spring training, a full year removed from COVID, that he'll be better. Have Julio Rodriguez called up, who's supposed to be like the second coming. I don't know, something like that. And then hopefully we can get Kyle Lewis fully healthy for an entire season. So I mean, that outfield right there should be enough to contend in the division with Houston and Oakland. And especially with Houston, it sounds like Carlos Correa is not coming back. But that, to me, that's the team that really would contend in the playoffs. And this year, like, it's just like maybe get in and get some experience, right?
Yeah.
But next year, I feel like that's the team that I really want to get in. But I mean, what do you think, Brian? Do you think this team has a shot at sneaking in the wild card right now? Like I said, 5.5 back of Boston, who kind of laid an egg at the beginning of the month and really sunk down in the AL East. But got 3 games against Boston next month? Yeah.
And there's that confliction inside of me of like, the fan goes, yeah, absolutely. Like,
yeah,
you see the way they can play. You see the way, like, there's those flashes of greatness and fun, like where you see like the most enjoyable baseball. You're watching it, and on the other end, the way they're playing, they feel the same way. Yeah. And that's a scary ball club that does that. That can play that well, that looks good, that's happy on the field, like, and they're making those forward moves. But then there's, of course,
Scott Service actually last week, somebody brought up the run differential, because run differential is terrible. They've gotten blown out like 5-6 times, something like that. And the run differential has taken major hits because of it. But he said, we might not have a good run differential, but we're +90 in fun differential. which I think says a lot for the team chemistry. I mean, it's kind of funny, but says a
It
lot for what's going
is.
on there.
It does, and especially, and I know it's not the most. I don't think it was. It wasn't this month, and I apologize for not knowing time frames. But I know that uh, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, when management decided to trade. What is the?
Oh, Kendall Graveman.
Yeah, I was like, it was. I'm so
Yeah.
mad. I don't even remember names. Like that night to Houston, who we were playing,
Yeah.
and I think, and I think upper management can sometimes obviously throw a wrench in those, in those relationships, in that clubhouse feel. But it seems like they took that one in stride, and like you said, like you watch highlights, you watch some of the games, and it looks like they're just having fun, even though they're obviously dropping some games that they shouldn't. But like it's
Right.
the team chemistry is solid, and it seems like that's kind of a Mariners way. Like you never really hear like, oh, there's trouble brewing in the Northwest. Like we got some guys in the clubhouse that are angry, that are this, that are looking for a bigger contract or this. Like seems like a lot
Yeah.
of our vets that stay there, whether they get traded or we lose some people, whatever that may be. It seems like they seem to hold pretty tight to each other as a team, and try to keep that on the field and in the clubhouse. So it's always nice to see when those, because it makes them play better and it's more fun to watch.
Well, and that trade specifically, they were really upset about that Kendall Graveman trade because he was kind of a glue guy in the clubhouse. Everybody liked him a lot. But at the same time, the guys they traded for Abraham Toro and Joe Smith, have been awesome, which I think goes a long ways to kind of remedying that situation, right? Like there was somebody who went unnamed who went on a tirade in the clubhouse after the trade was announced and said it's the same thing every year. They're not even trying to make the playoffs. And I was assuming it was Kyle Seager because he's the only guy who's been there for any significant amount of time.
Yeah.
But everything seems good now. Seager's smiling and hitting home runs again and playing really well, and everybody's getting along still. Toro fits right in, but of course that helps, getting on base for 25 out of 28 games that he's been there. So that's going to fix a lot. And Joe Smith has like a 0.2 ERA and, 15 appearances, something like that. So that's really going to help a lot, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't Seager just hit his 30th or 31st bomb this season too?
He hit his 30th last night. And then you've got Mitch Haniger also has 29, and they're only one of two duos in the entire big leagues with 29 plus home runs on the same team, which is pretty impressive and pretty good for a team that I don't think is necessarily known for its power and also has one of the worst batting averages in the league, if not the worst.
Well, and those guys aren't like, I'm pretty sure Seager's probably bigger than Haniger, but they're not big dudes either. Like they're not.
Seager, I feel like is built about like me when I'm in shape. So like not like right now, but when I was in my fighting shape, when I was in my playing days, like I was built a lot like Seager, so I can relate to him and his power and his ability. But Haniger, my thing with Haniger is like pitchers just need to pitch him low and in all the time, because when he extends his arms, the ball is going over the fence every stinking time because he is so long and lanky.
Yeah, it's man, I would love to be able to even remotely do a little bit of what they do, but it's granted, back in my fighting days, I was just garbage at hitting from Jump Street, so that was. I guess the idea of just connecting with the ball was always a big thing for me. I'm like, I did it. Like, you guys were out by a mile. I'm like, hey,
I hit it though.
The bat.
I hit it.
It was in play. Deal with it.
So yeah, I went out to South Carolina.
My stats are different.
I went out to South Carolina in April and visited Brig, my buddy. He's the co-host, my co-host of the Big Show, the Baseball Together podcast. And we went and we toured the Greenville Drive Stadium. And I was taking some videos of some areas, and he followed the guy who was guiding us. He followed him down under the stadium, and he took us into the batting cage. And the guy was over like messing with some stuff, and I looked at Brig. I was like, "Is he gonna let us hit?" He's like, "Yeah, man." He hands me a bat. He's like, "Get on in there." I was like, "Oh, dude!" And it was so fun. Unfortunately, I broke the bat, and then we found another one. And so I got back in there, and Brian, I got my left nipple got hit by the baseball, like square. It hurt so bad. It was unreal. It's like,
First of all,
like,
that's a wild bout of physics for that to actually happen so perfectly.
you're telling me.
Yeah, it was probably almost as scary as it was painful, like the idea that happened.
Well, because he told me, he's like I stepped in there. He's like, I'll be honest with you. He's like, this isn't the best pitching machine. The Red Sox are supposed to bring one down because they're the Double A affiliate of the Red Sox there in Greenville. He's like, the Red Sox are supposed to bring down a better pitching machine that's more accurate. I was like, so like, do I need to wear a helmet? He's like, oh no, it's not that bad. I don't think it'll hit you, but just know that like not every pitch is going to be a strike. I was like, all right, that's fine. And so yeah, like I saw it coming, and I went to go back, and it got me, and I was like, I threw the bat. I was like cussing and screaming, and I told him, I was like, I was like, hey, if you guys come in here later today for some BP or something, I was like, if you see my nipple on the ground, just throw it away. I don't need it anymore. Like,
Yeah, it's
oh,
that's fine. Yeah, it's,
it hurts so bad.
you don't need more than one. Yeah, that's especially like, say what you want, but if you, I mean, it's going to hurt anyways. But if you catch the laces, I mean, it's going to burn it right off.
It felt like it, I'll tell you what. But it was crazy though, and that's one thing that like people I don't think realize is that I think you had that thing turned to like maybe 70, 65 or 70. It was coming in fast if you haven't seen a pitch in a long time, but if you have seen pitching, it didn't take much to get used to it, right? It wasn't like it was burning in there at 90. And that's one thing to me that says so much about the ability of big leaguers. That I saw today that Abraham Toro was late on a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and he still hit it to the shortstop from the left side. Like, I don't know how those guys do that.
I don't either. Not only that, I mean, that's one thing I'll say for either the average fan or the haters. You guys aren't athletes. You just stand there. Like the idea that one, they can do that, like you said, like that you're early or late or whatever, forwards, backwards, upside down, hitting something going that fast.
Yeah.
Not
I'd venture
and then
guess
also,
that most people couldn't hit a car going that fast.
Exactly. Exactly. Like someone goes over 15 in the school zone and people are mad. You put a baseball, a pitcher out there, like you're not even going to see it. And then the idea that these guys can also differentiate pitches, like that's a whole nother ball game. So they see 100 and then they see 86, which maybe to someone that's not a huge difference. In that short amount of feet, the eye catching it, going to the brain, going to the arms, going to the hands, going to the swing, like it's the mechanics and the way their minds react is intense.
Crazy.
It's super cool to know that, like, and maybe that's just because I'm not very smart or talented at most things. So seeing a human do that is pretty awesome, and maybe why I love the game so much, because I can root for someone doing it without any of the responsibility of possibly getting my nipple torn off by a baseball, which is big for me.
Yeah,
that's
it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Real quick, last thing here before we wrap up. I did some math, and these are the opponents that the Mariners have the rest of the way. Okay. There are 32 games. So there's one more on Sunday. By the time this comes out on Tuesday morning, this game will already be over, and we'll have 2 games against Houston. But so we got 1 against Kansas City, 3 against Houston, 3 at Arizona. I'm actually going to be at 2 of those games. I'm pretty stoked about that. And then 3 at Houston, 3 at home against Arizona, 3 versus Boston, 3 at Kansas City, 4 at Oakland, 3 at Angels, 3 at home versus the 3 at home versus the A's, and then the Angels again. And I went through and I did some quick math on those. I didn't have the Mariners sweeping any of those games, maybe the last 3 against the Angels, just because they're going to be out of it and everybody's going to be checked out as far as the Angels go.
Yeah.
But I have the Mariners, I feel like pretty conservatively finishing 20-12 because I think I have them losing 2 out of 3 to Houston and then splitting with Oakland and then losing 2 out of 3 against Houston again, I think. So I'm not real optimistic anytime they play the Astros because it hasn't gone well the last 10 years. But yeah, so I have 20-12, could be good enough for the playoffs, but most likely I think outside looking in. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Again, the fan in me wants to go, no, they're gonna, the way that they can play, it's gonna continue into the end of the season because they know that they're, right on that cusp.
Yeah.
If they just make, the few little differences here and there could make all the difference.
Yeah.
But then there's that sad Brian that's like, don't get your hopes up, silly. Like you're just
I know.
yeah. It's like waking up on Christmas morning to find out that it's actually July. Like it's not. You're so excited and you're like, oh wait, never mind. Like that's bad.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I think there's always that part of me though that sees like some of these guys get on some streaks, they start doing some things,
Mhm.
and I think what you said, like they might not go deep in a postseason run when they finally get there, but I feel like they always have that, and maybe it's because it's been so long that the idea they get in the playoffs, that is such a dangerous thing for someone who's been out for 20 years that they can wreck people because everything is gravy on top of that. Like
no expectations.
Exactly.
None whatsoever.
Like why not? Like you've already, you cross that threshold into, okay, we've got to that point. So let's just, the fun just gets more fun from there. But I would love it if you're, if they could just do that, a few of the right teams lose and we, and that's what it all, like, even saying that, I'm like having deja vu of like, if we just, we got a couple teams tank a little bit, our boys come together, hit a few key wins, and then there always is too that flash right at the end. You're like, man, we're a few of the right games, like,
just like the last 3 days, like today, Friday and Thursday, it came down to literally inches. Like it was like balls dropping right in front of outfielders. Last night in extra innings, Jake Fraley goes up to the wall and the ball hits the thumb of his glove and goes over for a 2-run home run in extra innings. Like it's just like the smallest things. And then I don't want to say it wrecks them, but they just aren't quite able to overcome them. And I think that, like I said, I don't think this is the year that they're going to be able to overcome that stuff. But I think next year they'll overcome most of it, and that's when they'll be good. And then I'm going to say right now, Brian, 2023 World Series Seattle Mariners.
Mark it, folks.
Mark it down. Yes.
Put it in the history books. I might get that tattooed, Brad. I might do it and just say, I'm going all in. And I'm not putting it somewhere to hide it. Probably
there you
face
go.
or neck. Face or neck for sure.
Definitely neck. I think neck would be the smart decision there. A good career choice, putting a tattoo of a Seattle Mariners World Series prediction directly on her neck. I think that's a perfect career move for you, Brian.
I couldn't agree more. I think it would do well for my non-existent dating life, my work, careers. You're right. I don't. The more we say it, I don't know if it's not a lose for me. Like it's wins all around if I do it.
And above
definitely
all
won't get made fun of on social media. Like I think people would really get behind me.
I think they would. And above all else, Brian, you could take a video, send it to me, and I can put it up on our YouTube channel because we're always open for great content.
I mean,
love content.
And if that isn't great content, I don't know what is. You can film the journey, like we can make it like a whole like vlog series.
Yep.
Of me making the worst decision of my life amongst a life of bad decisions. One of them being a Mariners fan. Just kidding, people. Become Mariners fans. They're a fantastic team, and their field, despite the name change, but still just irks me maybe a little bit. I've been to some fields and, you know, some different places. And I will say this, man, on the sound, a beautiful night. It's hard. It's hard to get a more beautiful setting because you're outside, but inside if you need to be. And it's just I don't know.
It's perfect.
It is.
You know what? There's not really a bad seat in the house either, because like if you're like me and you grew up going to the nosebleeds, if you're gonna go to T-Mobile and you're gonna sit in the nosebleeds, sit down the first base line, because then you can see the entire city.
Yeah,
like you can't beat that view. It's amazing. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that if you're, I mean, whether you're traveling to Seattle, a fan of sports or not, like it's just the atmosphere is worth the visit for sure.
Yep, most definitely. Well, Brian, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while now. I mean, you came on the big show with me almost 2 years ago now.
It's been oh man, that's another year stat that you're hitting me with, Brad.
I know. And I can't believe I had that realization just now when I said that, by the way, that it was 2 years ago.
Because really in my mind, like, you know, I know we don't catch up as, you know, much as we like or should, but
yeah,
like, I don't know if it's every time we talk, but I'm like, oh man, I'd love to get on another podcast with Brad. It was super fun. Like it's still fresh in my mind that we did it.
I know. It feels like it was like 6 months ago.
Yeah. Like, oh no, I'm fresh off the heels. Like I feel good. I feel like I'm in podcasting shape.
I think you stay in podcasting shape, Brian. I'll be honest with you. You've been in podcasting shape since I've known you.
Well, you know, that might be the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me. I appreciate you, Brad.
I appreciate you. Anyway, but thanks again, Brian. Baseball family, before we go, don't forget to hop on the shop. Yes, I said it like that. I sure did. That's 9plusus.com. Spell it out, NINEPLUSUS.com. And if you use code CPOD, SEAPOD, on any of the Seattle collection, you will get 15% off your purchase. That is right, 15% off as a thank you for listening to the Seattle Baseball Together podcast. Thanks for joining me. Thanks again, Brian. And with that, I will catch you next time.